What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this McLean Edger, and the problem is it was put away in storage because it kept breaking its belt. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this edger. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, McLean edgers are supposed to be a very good brand, with some costing more than a few high-end mowers. Now, this one, however, has seen better days. It's a bit beat up, and it's definitely showing its age. You can't fault the edger for that, as the person operating it is responsible for taking care of it. And I hate to say it, but this one has been handed off to other people who didn't have to pay that high price, and it shows. The good thing, though, is that it's built well enough that it's taken the punishment and kept on going, but it did need a bit of backyard engineering to do it. So here's the main problem. The last belt that was put on there, which was new and bought from a repair business, shredded itself. The belief was that the belt was the wrong size, so we're going to have to look into it and see if we can find the right size belt. The other problem is that the throttle lever is broken and there is zero resistance coming from it, so we need to replace that as well. Also, with the lever broken, you can't turn the engine off without removing the spark plug wire, and I'm pretty sure this would have been a pretty shocking experience. Before we try and start this engine, we need to check the oil and its level. And I hate to say it, it's a little low and very dirty, so we definitely need to change it if we get this edger working again. Next, I want to check to see if there's any gas in the tank, and I hate to say it, but it does, and it does not smell like gas anymore. Remember, gasoline does not have a very long shelf life. Now, an engine will run on slightly old gas, but it's not ideal, and that means we need to drain it and then let it dry out, and then we can put some fresh gas in the tank and see if we can get the engine to start. Now, since the throttle cable isn't working, I'll have to move the choke lever by hand, and if I do get it started, I'll have to have a way to shut off the engine, hopefully without getting shocked. I think for right now, I'll just put a zip tie on the wire, and that way I can just pull it to stop it. So unfortunately it didn't start, so what I'm going to do now is remove the air filter assembly and check to make sure I'm working the choke in the right direction, and also if the choke is actually working to close off the intake. So far it seems to work fine, so I'll try that one more time. Unfortunately, it still did not start, so next I want to use my spark checker to make sure we have a working ignition system. Now you can find these online for a few dollars, and all you have to do is install it in line with the spark plug, pull the rope, and watch for an orange glow in the tester. I know it was a bit tough to see without being in a dark room, but we did have an orange glow from the tester, so we do have spark. If you don't see an orange glow, you might have a bad ignition module. Now this time I'm going to put some gas into the carburetor's throat and try starting it again. So it started for a few seconds, which is great news. Before we tear into the carburetor, I want to try the test one more time and see if we can get it to run just a little bit longer. This process could coax the carb back to life without taking it apart. So luckily it started and ran by itself, which is great news, as I don't really like working on this style of carburetor. Now, I forgot to remove the spark checker from the spark plug, so I wasn't sure if the zip tie would work, but apparently it would have. I instead just choked the engine to stop it. Next, I want to put the air filter assembly back onto the engine and try starting it again, just to make sure it wasn't a one-time deal and that it will work with the original air filter. Luckily, it started and ran very well. I'm quite surprised as this engine sounds pretty good considering the way it looks from the outside. Since we know that this engine works now and the engine is warm, I think it's a good idea to drain the oil so we can put fresh oil back in it. And I'm always surprised that people do not change their oil as often as they should, and it looks like this when I drain it. Now, when refilling the oil on this engine, I usually just fill it till it touches the bottom of the threads, but I'd rather put a little bit too much than too little. It's now time to look at that shredded belt. I did find the right part number for the belt and I ordered it, and before we install it, I want to compare it to what's left of the old belt. It will be a little tough, but I want to see if they're the same size by holding them together. And I hate to say it, but whoever ordered the last belt ordered the right belt as well. That means there's another reason why this belt got shredded, and ours will end up the same way if we don't figure it out. I'm going to look at all the moving parts and see if there are any alignment issues. So I think I know what's going on. As you move the blade down to the ground, the belt either has to get longer or the blade has to move closer to the engine to keep it from breaking the belt. Obviously the belt isn't going to stretch, so the blade has to move, but as you can see, it's stuck and won't slide back on this spring-loaded shaft. It's rusted in place and probably hasn't been serviced in a long time. So to fix it, I'll put some grease in these two fittings and also spray some lubricant down the shaft, and then we'll see if we can get it to break free. As you can see, it's finally broken free and now we can slide along the shaft. However, it looks like the back part of this shield is making contact with this spring perch, so we'll make a slight adjustment to the shield and then that way it can slide as much as it wants without hitting it. Now that we know that our belt won't end up like the last one, we can now finally install the new belt. Now another reason why our belt could end up like the last belt is if one of the pulleys was damaged. If that was the case, you'd have to figure out why it got damaged, then replace it, and then make sure it doesn't get damaged again. Now once the belt is back on, try lowering the blade and make sure that the belt isn't getting too tight and that the whole blade assembly is moving like it's supposed to on that spring-loaded shaft. Ours is working like it should, so we can now replace the broken lever and the cable. So here's the new assembly, and I hate to say it, but I could not find a direct replacement. The cable on this one is about 2 feet longer than the original, so we're going to have to cut it to length and put a new bend on the end. We'll start by removing the old lever, followed by the air filter assembly, then we can disconnect the cable from the carburetor. Just out of curiosity, I want to take apart the old lever and see what happened to it. And I hate to say it, it looks like it just broke, and even though I could come up with a few creative ways to fix it, I'd rather just replace it. I also didn't realize that the base for the new lever would be a different size from the original, so hopefully I can make it work. Now it also looks like the choke is kind of sticky, so I'll spray it down with some lubricant. After that, I'll make a new bend at the end of the cable and then reattach it to the linkage on the carburetor. I'm going to be honest and say it, but I had to make a lot of adjustments to the cable and the linkage system to get it to work properly, but I think I finally got it to work right. After testing that the new throttle lever will work the choke and throttle assembly the right way, I'll then put the air filter back on the carburetor and finally do another test start, and of course I'll also activate the blade to make sure it's working like it's supposed to. So it started and ran very well, and the blade seems to work like it's supposed to. Now the kill switch didn't work, but that's because the contact for the ground wire needed to be adjusted to make proper contact, which is something I did off camera. Now it starts and stops with the throttle lever like it's supposed to, and that means no more zip tie. So my question is, if you have one of these large edgers, how often do you have to change your belts for the blade? Personally, this is probably the first time I've ever had to change a belt, as most of the time they never get this old to have this type of problem. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.